Hello and welcome to the Pain Perspective Podcast. I am Nikki, one of your hosts, here with my husband, the one and only Dr. Ashu Goyle. And together we are here to share real and organic conversations from people who have experienced pain, whether it be emotional, physical, or mental, and how they overcame it and created a life they love. We will also be sharing conversations with experts in the field to give you the tools and resources you need to live the healthiest and happiest life possible. Our hope for you is that you hear stories that will change your life and give you hope for the future, that you will walk away feeling motivated and like you can take on the world. Now grab that pen and paper. It's time for the Pain Perspective Podcast.
Welcome everyone to the Pain Perspective. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Jyoti Patel join us. She is the medical director and founder of Arizona Integrative Medicine and Spa. And today we're going to be talking about gut health and the MindBody Connection.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited to be here in your home and, be with you because I love being with like-minded practitioners. And I just love everything that you're talking about on your social platforms and your new podcast that's coming out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And we're excited. We've been wanting to plan this for a while. And I've been watching your videos, and I just love the content that you're putting out there. I love the information, how you practice. And I just really wanted to sit down and kind of pick your brain. And we wanted to
learn as much as we can.
Yeah, exactly. Because I just feel like you're a wealth of knowledge, and I just want to be a sponge and soak it all up.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So why don't we start? We're making a healthy meal. We're going to try that in a little bit. But why don't we start and just learn a little bit about you? Like, where are you from? Do you have children? Tell us a little bit about your family life and how you became a functional medicine practitioner.
Yeah. So I am from Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born in Chicago, but I actually grew up in India. So my parents immigrated to the U.S. like most people in the 70s. Most Indian people came in the 70s. They sent me back to live with my grandmother in India. So I was raised by my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And life was a lot slower. I remember waking up with the sun, no alarm clocks, and the sound of her prayer bells, the smell of her incense, and her singing in her prayer room. It was, how we woke up in the morning, and we would pick flowers and put them in the altar, and then we would walk down to the market, which wasn't a supermarket. It was just a street with vendors, right? Mm-hmm. And they would be yelling out for your attention, and my grandmother would haggle and buy her fresh produce, and we'd go home, and she'd use fresh spices and whole food and make a nice lunch, and we weren't distracted by our smartphones or television, right? We were sitting down and eating a home-cooked meal. Yeah. And then if I wasn't in school, I was playing outside in the neighborhood with some kids and, in nature and running barefoot in the dirt, and life was easy. And so, fast forward, I moved to the U.S. and was raised by Western trained physicians. And so I followed the same rat race that everybody can relate to: striving, driving, gunning, working hard, 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, decided to do 2 residencies at the same time because that's what immigrant parents recommend, right? So just keep gunning and driving overachieve. And I was disconnected. I was working long hours like most physicians in training, sacrificing good food, eating in the cafeteria, usually a packet of Oreos and a Coke, sacrificing sleep, usually with one eye open with a pager, usually being on call, and, even post-call not being able to come down from that adrenaline high. So stressed to the nines, not sleeping, not exercising, eating maybe more processed food than I've ever had in my life. And then in my third year of residency, I developed cancer. And it was a variant of thyroid cancer. So it was something called a tall cell variant. So anyway, I disconnected because, as all physicians, we put on a front of being strong, brave. We don't show our vulnerability. We put on a badge of martyrdom. We keep working. We don't want our colleagues to think that we're weak or not part of the team. So I worked through residency. I had the surgery and the radiation for the cancer. And then in my 4th year, I have recurrence again. And this time it had metastasized to my neck and my chest. So I had to have a full radical neck dissection. And I did.
What does that mean?
So they have to cut you from like an apron cut from ear to ear and take out all the lymph nodes. Wow. And I still stuck in this mindset of doing and not being, not giving myself permission to take a break or to, not finish on time or show up in the way that I wanted to show up. So I kept gunning and kept doing, just like most people. The stress levels were high. I was disconnected. I was disconnected from my lifestyle choices and my health. I thought there were two different things. And I'm a physician. And you're a physician. And we're not taught the connection. We're not taught that our lifestyle choices, our behaviors, our mindset, our stress has everything to do with what's happening in our bodies. So fast forward, I graduate, I move, I get a job. Again, I get a toxic job. And we know what it's like in medicine. It can be quite toxic sometimes. And I had a new 1-year-old son. And I needed to pick him up from daycare at 6:30. And I'd asked my boss if I could be done by 6:30. And she looked me in the eye and said, I can't promise you there won't be ill will between us if you leave and I'm still working.
Oh, wow.
But, you don't give yourself permission to then take a break or to stand up for what you think you need.
Exactly.
So what do? You prove yourself because you're never enough. You're never worthy enough. You're never done enough. You have to show up in a bigger way. So I kept working and I would have somebody else pick him up and I put in 12, 14-hour days. I had my third recurrence, more surgery, more metastatic spread. Fourth surgery, more metastatic spread.
Wow.
Still disconnected, still thinking that I needed to keep up with this heavy workload, gunning and driving until I realized that this was what I needed to do. And it was actually fortuitous because the folks that I was working for had rescinded my partnership because they said my health was a concern.
Oh, wow.
But that bottomed me out in a good way.
Absolutely.
It was a coming to Jesus moment for me. I had to reset myself. I had to choose my own priorities. What do I want to do? And so then I decided to break away from that scene and I started just contracting for a year to reset, to see what I wanted to do. Started to focus more on my health. Being a patient made me more humble. It allowed me to see what it was like to have surgery, to be in the hospital, to be in a hospital gown, to not have certainty, to not have somebody tell you what your outcome is. The vulnerability of just going to the bathroom and having a nurse take you there. Things that, we as clinicians never really experience. Being on the other side of it kind of brought me to a better place, a better connection with my patients. And so I knew what I didn't want to do in medicine. And it gave me a chance to see what I wanted to do. And so then that's where my journey really started, starting my own practice, practicing the way I wanted to, treating my patients and my staff the way I thought humans need to be treated, really starting to start with myself, right? If I can't walk the walk, I can't talk the talk. So being able to change my own lifestyle, taking time for myself, giving myself permission to work out, to eat right, to spend time with family. And so that's where my journey started. And and through there, I was blessed with people that introduced me to integrative medicine. So I did the fellowship down at the U of A with Dr. Andrew Weil and I got board certified in integrative medicine, started weaving that into my practice. Patients were so excited to be able to have a more comprehensive approach to their health, including nutrition and movement and mind, body and sleep and really having that listening ear and hearing their story. And then I felt like there was still something missing. And so I did the IFM functional medicine program and got certified in functional medicine, which allowed me to take a bird's eye view to the physical, mental state and be able to break it down into the biochemistry and the biology of why there's dysfunction and the root cause of things, rather than just using prescriptions and surgeries or procedures, which are important, to band-aid health. I was able to then dive deeper into why there was dysfunction and help people really realign their health. Because I was doing that for myself, it became easier for me to help other people do that too. And then, of course, I was, again, in my journey, I call this like that. I feel like I'm on a journey. And my journey of health and wellness, I met up with Deepak Chopra. And,
how did that connection come about?
It was serendipitous, I think. I think, and I hate to even say this, but it was a manifestation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I went to a Chopra retreat in 2017 in Hawaii, and I said, this is what I want to do. And it was the strangest thing. 2 years later, Deepak Chopra decides to open up a wellness retreat in Arizona, in my backyard, and was looking for physicians that were integrated functional, that were open to the Ayurvedic tools. Now I'm coming full circle to my grandmother.
Wow.
And learning, learning my, going back to my culture and finding my roots and being able to help and heal people with more tools in my tool belt.
Yeah.
So I was able to take his Ayurvedic healing course and got my certification in Ayurvedic lifestyle. And I started teaching 2 years ago in his retreat center. So I teach Ayurvedic nutrition, I teach Ayurvedic practices, and I do Ayurvedic lifestyle consults for the guests that come to the retreats. So it's added more tools into my platform.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just love medicine.
Love it.
I love the human body.
Exactly.
And I love my patients, and I want to help them heal. And I know I got disenfranchised with modern medicine, conventional medicine. I mean, there's a role for it, for sure.
Absolutely.
And you'd agree, there are people that need conventional
For
medicine.
sure.
We're blessed that we're in this perfect time where we have both the wisdom of ancient cultures and we have the tools of modern medicine to help our patients.
Absolutely.
But we have to remember the ancient wisdom. We can't throw that away. We need to bring that in when we see our patients.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's my journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is just, it's so fascinating. Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary.
It really is. Yeah. I love hearing the history of how, you came about, and really is interesting how I feel like for each person there is a path that is kind of destined. And even before the conversation started and we were talking about how you even became a doctor, and you didn't want to become a doctor and you wanted to go into accounting, but then your path just kind of led you down and you found your purpose. So yeah, you can see, like, when you were speaking about, health and wellness, you can see the passion coming through and the true giving nature that you have. So it's wonderful. But one of the things, we wanted to talk about was gut health.
Yeah.
I think you specialize in a lot, but it's a topic that a lot of people have issues with. And I think people don't really understand how important your gut health is. And I think we're in a society where antibiotics is kind of the norm, and everybody, I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, oh, I had the flu, and I think I had the flu or a cold, and I just took a Z-Pack. And so I think really informing and educating people on the importance of treating your gut with kindness, respect, and nurturing it, and you'll create that optimal well-being. Yeah.
It's definitely not a new concept, right? We know Hippocrates said it, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, all ancient wisdom healing practices focused on the fact that the gut was the seat of all health. And so we're just coming back to that concept now. We've realigned ourselves with information that we already have. And now in the upcoming sciences, we've talked a lot about the gut microbiome, and you just mentioned antibiotics and how there's such a connection between the trillions of organisms that live in our colon, whether it's bacteria, viruses, fungi. These organisms actually play more of a role in our health than our own DNA.
Yeah.
We carry around more bacterial cells than we carry on human cells.
Wow.
And they're on the surface of our skin. They're in every orifice. They're in our entire GI tract. And it's this tropical rainforest of organisms that when they work in harmony, then we're in alignment, we're in flow. And when we disrupt that ecosystem, when we disrupt that tropical rainforest with pesticides and chemicals and processed and ultra-processed foods, and we throw in medications, antibiotics, we destroy the cohort of good organisms that are symbiotically living with us. And they're communicating with our nervous system. 90% of our serotonin is made in the gut with our gut microbiome, 50% of dopamine, which is our get up and reward hormone. Our hormones are regulated by our gut microbiome. Our metabolic function, our ability to lose weight, our regulation of blood sugar, our mood balance. So much is regulated by the gut microbiome, and we're just at the precipice of figuring out that, that way to rebalance the mind and the body. So I know you guys deal with a lot of mind-body stuff and chronic pain. What do you think? What have you seen has helped your patients in terms of the gut?
So I'll tell you what, a lot of my patients are big on anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs. And I try to explain to them how disruptive that is to your gut flora, right?
Yeah.
It can actually destroy the bacteria in your gut. It also can create ulcers and, GI issues that can be very traumatic. So I tell all my patients, ideally, what you want to do is focus on the anti-inflammatory diet, which is really huge in what we do. Food makes such a big difference in your overall well-being, and just with gut health, of course, because it's going into your gut. But also it can help reduce inflammation, so it can help with pain. So that's our focus.
Yeah, and there's lots of studies to actually back that up. So, again, people get a little confused about what the anti-inflammatory diet entails.
Yeah.
So try to make it really simple. I tell them, how long has it been since it left the earth? And how many steps did it take from the earth to your plate? Okay.
You know what? Which is, that's so simple. And that's such a simple way to think about it and to talk to your patients about it.
Yeah. And then start from there. So if it's one step from the earth, then you're doing pretty good so far. And if it's been a short period of time, then you're doing pretty good from there, right? So it's cutting out that processing, ultra processing, preservatives, chemicals, modifying in factories. Again, that's the most natural way. Second thing that's important is rotating the food. A lot of times people get stuck in eating the same food every single day, right? And that limits the diversity of your gut microbiome. And that's an important part of an anti-inflammatory diet, is to have your well-sourced animal proteins, if that's your protein source, or your well-sourced vegetable or vegetarian proteins. So that's one piece of it. Having good sources of omega-3 fats, again, whether it's veg or non-veg, whether you're doing seafood and bivalves and fish, fatty fish, or you're doing seeds and nuts and and vegetables that are rich in omega-3 fats, all of that is good. Variety is key here.
Right.
And then once you get past that, it's always colorful fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
We know that the color,
Eating the rainbow.
yes, phytonutrients, light nutrients. So what does that mean? Those nutrients reflect a different spectrum of light, a different frequency of light, so a wavelength of light. So every time you see a color, it's actually translating to a different nutrient and different phytonutrients. And so when you're looking at red, yellow, orange, you might be seeing carotenoids in the form of lutein and zeaxanthin, and it might be really good for skin health, bone health, teeth health, and might be really good for eye health. And then you have your dark leafy greens, rich in chlorophyll and vitamin K, and all the phytonutrients that are really good for your again bone health, blood health, all that kind of stuff, liver health. You're going down those blue, purple, red fruits and vegetables with those bioflavonoids that are so good for brain health, so good for heart health. So adding the color back in, white, allicin, garlic, onions, adding those colors in adds in phytonutrients, light, reflective nutrients. Potpourri of medicines that actually touch your genes and cause epigenetic changes. They're communicators. That's how they work. They communicate with your genes to turn on your anti-inflammatory pathways. So when we talk about cumin or turmeric, cumin, right? What does that do, right? People talk about turmeric all the time. How does it work? It's a biological weapon to decrease inflammation in the body because it signals the anti-inflammatory cascade, right? So your body is a self-healing, self-repairing unit. And food is information. Food is medicine. Food is communication. But just as those foods can trigger inflammation or decrease inflammation, there are other foods that can trigger inflammation, right? So the last piece of that, besides their colorful food sources, herbs and spices, seeds and nuts, whole grains. So how does that anti-inflammatory diet manifest? Some people will do a Mediterranean diet. So if you're looking for something, you're looking for a palette, you're looking for recipes, you're looking for a muse, the Mediterranean diet is a good place to start. What do you guys think?
So, little health history for me, I have Hashimoto's, and back when I discovered that I had it, I was diagnosed with it. The paleo diet was recommended for me, which it didn't work for my body. I'm a smaller person. I tend to be a little on the hypoglycemic side. So cutting out all the carbs actually made me feel worse. And so the Mediterranean diet was kind of what I went to. And I feel like it's just a very well-balanced diet. It's not super strict. It's just focusing on what makes sense, which is fruits and vegetables, all of your healthy, nuts, omegas, lean meats, cutting down on your red meats, which I feel like is a lot of the anti-inflammatory diet. I feel like they're very similar. But one thing I was going to ask you, because there's so many different takes on what the anti-inflammatory diet is. And a lot of people, some people say no cheese, some people say H cheese, some people, say no alcohol, some people say you can have red wine.
Mm-hmm.
So what, in your opinion, is the most beneficial anti-inflammatory diet? Is it a diet in moderation, or what are your thoughts?
So you and I had this conversation before, and I said, I'm a flexitarian. And
Yeah,
you said, what do you eat? I said, I'm a flexitarian because I truly believe that everything in moderation. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not a perfect person. I don't always eat 100% clean, even though that would be my intention. There's just going to be things that seep into our diet, and that's just who we are as humans in this Western world.
Yeah.
So I never set the stage. I'm always humble, saying I'm the first person to, to say that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to figure out what's the right thing to do. So the first step I tell my patients is there is no judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Just start where you are and keep moving the needle towards what makes you feel good.
Right.
So start to tune in with your own physiology, because I do believe in individualized, customized care.
Mm-hmm.
So when my patient comes in, I don't give them a cookie cutter diet.
Mm-hmm.
I start with the closer to the earth and one step away kind of thing. But then I tell them, feel it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like you felt it out.
Yeah.
Like become the body whisperer.
Yeah.
Your body is talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
So when I eat grains, I'll tell you a story about me again. So I decided one day I wanted to be vegetarian because I heard that was really healthy and I needed to cut out all this meat. And I decided to go to the store and buy steel cut oats. And I started boiling the steel cut oats for 20 minutes every morning and put cinnamon in it. And I, put it down resistantly, but I, just didn't like the texture or the taste, but I thought I was doing myself a favor. So I would just eat it.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, I was at the garden trying to spray my plants. My hands were like sausage digits.
Oh.
I couldn't even make a fist. I had to use my other hand. I'm like, what is going on? I'm eating a vegetarian diet. I'm being so healthy.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, my genetics and my physiology, that was an inflammatory trigger for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that excessive amount of grains and carbohydrates, because I have a strong family history of diabetes in both sides of the family, puts me in that category of having it become more inflammatory for me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I cut it out. It took about 2 weeks to go back to my flexitarian diet and add eggs back into my breakfast.
Yeah.
And I was able to get, some control back into my hands. Wow. So my canary, and everybody has a canary. I always ask people, what's your canary? Is it your tummy? Is it your head? Is it your hands?
Yeah.
What's your canary?
Yeah.
If my joints are my canary. So when I make bad decisions, like I did over the holidays, I knew I was making bad decisions.
You can feel it.
Yeah. I might be, a Chinese meal the night before. It causes me to have that water retention and my rings don't fit the next day.
Yeah.
Or I had a really explosive dessert feast and I felt joint pain the next day. So what I want to tell my patients often is it's okay that you slip.
Yeah.
Because in failure is learning. Mm-hmm. So I tell my 14-year-old, FAIL, first attempt in learning.
Yeah.
So when you fail and you then become connected to your body and you recognize that that's a trigger point for you, now you have a choice.
Exactly.
And then you have to choose better.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, is there a specific thing that falls into the anti-inflammatory diet? It really is individual.
Yeah.
If you are sensitive to dairy and you know it causes gastric distress, I would be the first one to say to you, you know what, Nikki, cut it out.
Yeah.
And if you're not an oatmeal kind of girl like me, that's not what you should be doing, even if it follows a Mediterranean diet plan. So
I really love that. It's not one size fits all.
It's not.
And that's why you and I left corporate medicine and started our own practices so we can individualize care.
Yes.
And it's really about figuring out what each individual patient needs because all of our needs are different, right? So there are some things that work universally for everyone, but most things don't. So,
So you start with the patient,
and
you kind of move from there. So there are so many different factors involved. Who they live with, who they eat with, what their financial constraints are, what their time constraints are, how many jobs do they have, what are their resources, what is their knowledge when it comes to food and cooking. So unfortunately, in traditional medicine, like you mentioned, we have 15 minutes to see the patient, to review their labs, to write their prescriptions, to get their note done. There's not enough time, and all the paperwork that comes with that. There's not enough time to explore the reasons why that person is not able to move towards better health. It's never about knowledge. People know what they're supposed to do. There are reasons why they're not able to get from where they are to where they want to be. And so part of my journey is to be that silent witness to their journey and also to be their guide. And give them the motivation and tools to help them make tiny shifts to better health. I tell people I heal people in slow motion now.
Yeah.
So, that's my job. I heal people in slow motion. And how does that work? It works one visit at a time, and one habit at a time, and one conversation at a time. So,
yeah, we call them baby steps.
Yeah.
In our program, we, it's all about not overwhelming people, because I think, again, you were talking about your own experience and how it humbled you. So it's the same thing with me. I have my own experience, and it's kind of trying to communicate with people and share what I learned going through the process. And I stumbled, a few times, and kind of trying to allow people to not have to experience the same thing, and kind of make their own choices for themselves as well, and do it in a way that they are doing it step by step, but they're making the choice every step of the way. The gut is so important. And one of the other parts that we were going to talk to you about is the connection. And we kind of touched on this again before, when you first got here, but the connection with your gut and not only inflammation in your body, but also pain.
Yeah.
And how those two are connected, and how, the health of your gut can possibly cause symptoms to be greater.
Yeah. So, I know you work in this field a lot, but the endocannabinoid system, which is just something we're starting to learn about, which is a pathways in our body that fall in line with our vascular system, our nervous system. There's a whole separate set of receptors that modulates pain. And interestingly enough, there's some new studies to connect the endocannabinoid system with the gut microbiome. And there's a large amount of those receptors in our gut as well. So modulating pain, whether it's producing positive chemicals like anamides that help us with pain regulation, we talk about CBD a lot. So again, getting back to the crux of the matter, a lot of people right now are talking about CBD and taking THC and taking cannabis, or taking derivatives of CBD for chronic pain or for inflammation. Well, your body makes these chemicals that attach to these receptors that help us feel good, that help us modulate pain. And so by resetting the GI tract, by fixing the gut microbiome, by improving your diet, by decreasing inflammation in the gut, you actually can help improve the function of this system. What do you think about that?
That's fascinating. Yeah. I'm not well versed in the endocannabinoid system, but I know that patients respond very well to CBD. So that would make a lot of sense, when they actually ingest it.
Right.
More so than topically, I'm finding.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that there's that connection.
Yeah.
In the gut,
and we actually produce our own anamides. So taking the CBD from a hemp plant is just adding more to what our body already makes. And we know that we can enhance the function of this system by getting a good night's sleep, by regular exercise, by eating a whole food, plant-forward diet, by making sure that we're reducing the exposure to chemicals and working on our mind-body balance. There's so many new studies now coming out looking at the endocannabinoid systems and helping people with modulation of pain. And I find it fascinating that it's tied mostly to the gut.
Yeah. And gut is also tied to a lot of diseases, correct?
Yeah. So every disease.
Okay.
You can name anything and I will say gut. Whether it's hormonal health, whether it's brain health. So there's interesting studies coming up with the gut microbiome and chronic disease. So we're not mainstream yet, but in clinical trials, in human trials and animal trials, they're doing fecal transplants on kids with autism. ASU here, Arizona State University, published an internationally recognized study that showed that doing fecal transplants, changing the stool of a autistic child by giving them stool of a healthy person, showed statistically significant changes in their behavior and their gut health.
That's fascinating.
They've done studies on Parkinson's patients to help improve gut health, and because a lot of Parkinson's patients have chronic constipation and they have dysautonomia. They found that by doing a fecal transplant, they were able to show improvement. They've done studies on bipolar patients, or there's white papers being published on mental illness and fecal transplants. There's been a tremendous amount of work on even obesity and metabolic changes, hormonal changes. So changing your gut microbiome can actually shift chronic disease Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
So we're just on the cusp of figuring out how to do this better.
Wow.
And the FDA, I think I did a recent video on it, but the FDA approved the first rectal fecal transplant suppository, Ribota.
And explain what exactly is a fecal transplant
Yeah.
for anybody who's not familiar.
So essentially they get donors, like you would get an organ donor. And
is this like a newborn baby?
It's an adult.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's an adult who has healthy poop.
Mhm.
So if you're somebody who says, I'm a healthy person, I eat regular healthy food and I have regular bowel movements and I'm a really healthy person, I have no chronic disease, you will qualify as a donor.
Wow.
The Mayo Clinic here in Scottsdale does fecal transplants.
Mm-hmm.
And so they collect the stool from a healthy person like you.
Mm-hmm.
They screen it for any diseases like HIV, hepatitis,
Mm-hmm.
any infectious diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And then they process it and they put it into, right now they're doing it into an enema, or they put it down via a tube. They put a tube down your throat and into your stomach and they feed the stool through there, or they do it up the rectum as an enema.
Mhm.
But like I said, the FDA approved the first ever fecal stool suppository.
Wow.
It was a group of MIT scientists that designed it, and it's now used for C. diff, and it's a one-time treatment, and it's
Fascinating.
significantly effective. So C. diff is a chronic infection of the colon that some patients can get. It's quite debilitating, causes severe diarrhea, causes volume loss, fluid loss, nutritional loss, and they go through rounds of antibiotics, and a lot of times it's hard to cure them. But they found that by giving them the stool of a healthy person, they can actually put them back into health. And I was looking at the history of fecal transplants, and it was actually done in traditional Chinese medicine in the 500 BC.
Really?
Yeah, there's some
Wow.
stuff about fecal transplants back then for GI infections. I think that again, knowledge is always
How are they
recycled.
doing that back then? Do you know?
I didn't really dig into the details.
Yeah.
I'm assuming some type of enema,
All
right? Some type of enema of healthy stool into an unhealthy patient. But I think that we're on this journey to recognize that we're not alone,
Mhm.
right? And our mind and body are connected.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about how we disconnect the mind and the body in medicine.
Mhm.
We as physicians think we're only responsible for everything neck down.
Mhm.
And anything that has to do with the mind or mood has to do with psychiatry, and we send them on their way.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're wrong.
Mhm.
There is a strong connection between the mind and the body.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest connections between the mind and the gut is the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
that I think a lot of people, probably your audiences, have heard of the vagus nerve, but it's cranial nerve number 10. It originates in the brain stem. It comes down through your sensory organs, like your ears, your eyes, nose, the throat. It runs through the vocal cords. It regulates your breathing, regulates your heartbeat. It regulates your every aspect of your digestion, from stomach secretions, acid secretions, through pancreatic secretions, bile release from the gallbladder, the movement of your small intestine and large intestine, the muscle movements. All of it is regulated by the vagus nerve, all the way down to your bladder function, your sweat glands, your stress responses. All of it has to do with your vagus nerve. It's one of the most primitive, most important nerves in our body.
Okay.
And it's also tied to our fight or flight
Right.
response.
Mhm.
So a lot of times what happens is somebody goes through surgery or has a traumatic experience. Oftentimes that mental stress causes them GI distress.
Mhm.
They have what's called an
Yeah.
ileus.
Mhm.
We know that in medicine. It's a condition where the bowels stop working.
Oh, wow.
So after post-surgery, it may take the patient, hours, if not
Yeah.
days, to get their poop to come out.
Yeah.
And doctors don't explain this, but it has to do with the vagus nerve. And that shock, that trauma, that cutting, that the discomfort that the body has gone through causes a fight, flight, or freeze response.
Yeah.
And during that period of time, the patient may not urinate or may not defecate.
Yeah.
So we keep the patient in the hospital
Yeah.
until we know that they've had a bowel movement or a bladder movement.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to make sure they're out of that phase. But what we don't teach them is stress reduction, breath work,
Right.
vagal toning.
Yeah.
Vagal stimulation allows the body to return to health,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So that's such an important aspect
Yeah.
of recovery. And so I find that, we in medicine need to talk more about the mind-body connection.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know, so you have a lot of history and experience with the mind-body connection, being a yogi and doing breath work. I know you laugh, but you have that's such a big part of who you are.
Sure.
I mean, tell us like a little bit more about how that has helped you like with your own health and gut health and all of it.
Well, I got introduced to Hatha Yoga in the early 90s. I was in college at Ohio University, and I met this extraordinary woman, Richa Elan, and she was teaching a Hatha Yoga class. And this was before yoga became hot yoga, aerial yoga, gym yoga, no Lululemon. This was real yoga. And the first several weeks of the class was all breath work.
Yeah.
Because her philosophy was you need to learn to breathe before you can move. And so that was my introduction to breath work. So I learned breath work, connecting with my body through the breath, and then learning how to move it. So all the asanas or the poses in Hatha Yoga are associated with the breath. So you breathe into each pose and the breath guides you into each pose. And that was my first introduction to really using my mind and body connecting to control my health. I was incredibly healthy all through high school or through college and medical school, worked out regularly. And then eventually I got into meditation. And I believe that's really where the vagus nerve stimulation came into, the vagal nerve toning came into play. Been trying to meditate for decades. And then Nikki and I learned about transcendental meditation. So we took a TM course. And that was the first place I heard the instructor say, stop trying to meditate. You're never going to do it if you try. I'm like, oh, like light bulb. But once that happened, I learned to meditate. Like, not becoming attached to the thoughts. And that really changed my physiology, my overall well-being, right? And I think that looking back, there are a lot of events that led me to where I am today, the journey, right? But that was a key moment in my journey to get me to where I am today.
I mean, breath work for me has been profound as well. So we got trained, 4 years ago in transcendental?
2016.
Yeah. And that was really my first experience. So going back to the gut, I've had gut issues pretty much my entire life. I was sick as a child and been on antibiotics and just never really had the information and education about the gut, body connection or gut and mind connection. And so you and I started dating, we got married, and he said, why don't you come with me to this meditation course? And I had tried to meditate in the past, didn't understand anything about it. And so we go, and I had probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. We left and I felt like I was just floating on a cloud. And it was really separating myself from, like you said, trying to meditate. So on and off, I've been practicing transcendental meditation and really got more, became more diligent about my practice during COVID because it was such a stressful time. And I remember back then thinking, okay, this is really stressful. I want to use some tools to help support me during this whole entire, phase. And so I started meditating and then just kind of started changing things. And then as we're talking about our journeys, I somehow was introduced to some of these people that I follow on, podcasts, these amazing women who are really into spirituality, went to a retreat and I was introduced to breath work. And that was life-changing. I mean, the breath work in itself, because you don't realize how much, you're carrying around on a daily basis. And like you're talking about with surgery and trauma and, you can have, we've talked about this, you can have little traumas, you can have larger traumas and what it's doing when it's kind of trapped in your body. And so doing breath work and things like that, and just supporting yourself and allowing your body to release it has just, I mean, I want everybody to do it. You know, everybody needs to do it.
I think we're collectively moving towards that
Yes.
as a global community. I think there's
Yes.
been more of a shift for us to find our spiritual path. Speaking of surgery, it was interesting. There was a study out of Kaiser Permanente in California. They did a pre-ops guided imagery on their patients. And they found that the patients that did the guided imagery prior to their surgery, they published this data, by the way, the patients had fewer complications, less blood loss, shorter hospital stay, and overall decreased cost. That's the reason why they published the study.
Of course.
But it's interesting where, use of breath work, use of guided imagery before, during, and after a stressful event can really shift how the body moves through something stressful and changes and puts us right back to homeostasis, which is where the body wants to live. So I have a retreat story for you.
Okay. Love it.
So in my journey, my journey of wellness, I decided I wanted to be a mindfulness teacher. So I went to the UCSD and I was doing their mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher training. But I was still in the doing mindset. Like, this was a checkbox I need to have. This is another tick in my tick. This is another certificate on my wall. That's always been my, I don't know, my
motivation.
My motivation. Unfortunately, I get stuck in that wheel of doing. So I go to this retreat and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be a week away from my office. This is great. I'll get all my, blogs written, emails written. I'll have all the podcasts I want to listen to, all the books I've been wanting to read. I have all this week to get everything done, right? Like, still doing. I get there and they're like, you can't have anything. I'm like, what do you mean I can't have anything? Like, you can't have books. You can't have notebooks. You can't have a pen even. You literally have to sit in silence. It was a Vipassana. It was a silent retreat. I was like, are you kidding me? I went through the stages of grief. First I was like, wait a minute, I'm in denial. I'll just sneak it under my bed covers. No one will see me. Or bargaining, why did I do this? I could have done something else. I'm angry at myself. I'm sad. And finally I just resorted to this, okay, I'm going to make the most of this. So I'm sitting in the meditation hall. Everyone's super relaxed, but I'm still type A, still wound up because I haven't been able to decelerate from the constant doing. So I plant myself in the front of the clock. I'm like, okay, schedule, clock, ready. Okay, go. Meditate. Okay, now it's 30 minutes. Now it's time to move. So I'm power walking. I'm labyrinth walking. I throw down my yoga mat. I'm flowing. I'm like using this time because I have to be effective. I have to be doing something, right? So after the third day of being silent, and you've heard me talk nonstop for a while, so you know how hard this would have been for me. So I'm going into Thursday and I haven't spoken and I haven't done anything. And I have now exhausted everything I could do mentally to process my work. I had to do something. So I decided I'm going to take this hike. I'm going to take a walk out of the retreat. I'm going to go see the ocean. We were in California, Rancho Palo Verde. It's on the cliffside. So I was going to see the ocean and I was going to come back and that was going to be my checkbox. So I'm on a mission. I'm not dressed for a hike. I don't bring any water. It's the middle of summer. It's noon. It's lunchtime. I start walking with a mission. Now I'm like in my life, driven with a goal, right? Doesn't matter what gets in the way. I can't find the ocean. I don't care. I'm going. I go cut through neighborhoods. I get to this ravine, right? And there's this sign saying danger, wildlife, Three Sisters Reserve, stay on the path. I don't care. I'm going. So I go down this path. I'm down the trail. Now I'm an hour and a half in. Okay. This is my mindset. When I get stuck on something, this is how I do things. So I'm down this trail and I can't see the ocean. Finally I see the ocean. I'm like, oh, thank God, God's moment. Dopamine, check that box. I did something. And then I had to go back. But this climb was going to be so steep. I wasn't going to make it. I don't want to go slow. I have to go fast, right? I have to get back in time. So I decided I'm going to run down to the bottom. I'm going to get the road and get back up and hike back up or catch a ride back up. That was my plan. So now I'm running down this trail. It's getting narrower. The brush is getting thicker. There's no one around. It's been 2 hours now. And I get to the bottom of the ravine and it's a dead end. And there's a power plant and there's a fence line and there's high voltage signs and danger signs.
Oh my God.
But I'm still stuck in my mindset of nothing's going to stop me from doing what I need to do. I'm looking at the wash. I step on top of this rock and I'm like, I'm just going to go around the fence line and do what I need to do. And I hear something. and there's this huge black rattlesnake
Oh,
wrapped
my
around the
goodness.
rock that I'm standing on. Okay, I am not kidding you.
Yeah.
It was
Wow.
like one of those come to Jesus moments.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
step off the rock. There's no space, probably the size of this island. That's how much space there was between me and the snake. He's just sunning in the sun. He's not worried about me. I'm worried about him. But now I have this conversation with myself. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why can't you just sit like everyone else? Why do you constantly have to check a box? Why do you have to always do something? Why are you always chasing the darn ocean?
Yeah.
Just sit, just breathe, just be. What's wrong with you? Now you're stuck here. You're going to die. You haven't talked in 4 days. No one knows you're down here. You're going to die by yourself. Like, there was really this huge moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Even though it was slow, even though it was hard, even though I was going to have to stop a lot, the only way back up was up the cliff.
Yeah.
So there I was having to do something very uncomfortable for me, which is take my time and breathe
Wow.
and sit and rest.
Yeah.
And then I finally made it back to the retreat.
Wow.
And nobody knew I was gone. I took a shower quickly and got back to the meditation hall and pretended I was But it was, but it was a turning point for me, this epiphany that this, we in our modern culture aren't taught to just be.
Right.
We, even when we're meditating, we're told that it has to be a checkbox, that we have to do something. That when we're breathing, we have to contract and expand and do this breath. It's more simple than that. And so I think I've hit all these walls in my life to teach me these life lessons,
Absolutely.
to give me permission to be, to breathe, to be stable. And not only that, but my life's mission now is to teach,
Yeah.
and so I teach mindfulness in my clinic, and I have the 8-week course that I teach, but it's part and parcel of my gift for what I learned to share with other people that might be dealing with the same thing I deal with,
Yeah.
which is this constant needing to prove yourself and drive and check those boxes and be seen and be valuable and be relatable or whatever it is that I feel like I need to have. I have to show up in a bigger way. I don't need to. And so giving yourself permission to be just who you are in that moment, to meditate or not meditate, to have crazy thoughts or not have anything and feel floaty, whatever it is fine.
Yeah.
Like, there is no rules, right?
Yeah. There really are.
And that's free.
It's freedom.
It's free.
It's a lot less expensive than popping pills and
Yeah.
paying for medications.
Yeah.
Right?
Creating that surrender.
Yeah.
Which is, if you are type A, I feel like I am, and it's hard. It's really hard.
Stop doing, stop
Yeah, I
doing,
know.
stop getting busy, stop
I know.
over scheduling, stop over committing, and concentrate on quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
And now I think that as a culture, we're all hopefully finding that same thread of information, that same intelligence that we weaves through all of us is speaking to us in different ways and teaching us these life lessons. You're obviously ahead of the game with your journey, but it's good that
Still a journey though.
yeah,
Every day.
Yeah.
It's choices that we make, right?
yeah,
And sometimes the journey goes off.
Fears.
Yeah.
yeah,
Fears off a bit, but especially during the holidays.
right?
Yeah, I see so many patients. They're like, "Oh, I really am getting all this way." I'm like, "Yeah, it's the holidays. Just enjoy your family, enjoy this time. You can always make the choice afterwards, right? When things kind of settle down and you can get back into a normal schedule."
And that happens with the wellness culture a lot. And I know you and I have talked about that sometimes patients will come in and they will be adamant with the rigid lines about never eating anything that falls off their diet schedule or never missing a workout or always striving with their mindful work. And I'm like, that's just as detrimental as not doing anything,
Absolutely.
right? So if you get so pigeonholed into it isolates you from social affairs. It isolates you from family. It causes food anxiety. It causes health anxiety. It's still another way of driving and striving when you're trying to be perfectionist with your diet and your exercise and your supplements and your lifestyle. There's a happy medium to that. So that's an important lesson too. Yeah. Here I was trying to be mindful and check all my boxes, and I was literally the epitome of non-healthy. And then I needed a kick in the pants to remind me from that spirit animal, my rattlesnake, to let me know, hey, you're going down the wrong path.
Right.
Right? So, and then it reminded me of my journey when I was dealing with cancer. I was doing the same thing. Like, I was still ignoring the snake, right? I was just driving, striving, pushing, proving. And how many of us do that without really looking to see how that's affecting us mentally and emotionally? Because when we're stressed, when we're in fight or flight, we're disconnected. We're disconnected from our breath. We're disconnected from our body. We're disconnected from our emotions and our feelings. Mm-hmm. And we go down this path of autopilot, this patterned behavior that has been learned since we were children.
Yeah.
Right? How to get our needs met, how to get the attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance from others. Mm-hmm. And so that's so powerful in our wanting to be seen that we sacrifice the connection to our own bodies, our own minds, our own feelings, and our own needs. Mm-hmm. But who's ultimately responsible for making sure that our needs are met?
We are.
We are.
Mm-hmm. Right? So stop looking outside of ourselves. Yeah. Stop tying our success and our value and our self-esteem to things and accolades and degrees and achievements, and start retuning and focusing on what really matters.
Easier said than done.
True.
I think for all of us, right? But it's a matter of recognizing that, and then slowly making changes. Like we talked about diets, right? I'd like to change that to choices.
Yeah.
Right?
Choices.
Because diets. People do diets, they get healthy for a short period of time, but then they change their diet.
Yeah.
And now they're not healthy again.
Yeah.
Right? But it's really about making choices and creating habits, right? Instead of goals, we make habits, right?
Yeah.
Make choices that lead to habits that are good for us.
And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Yeah.
Because, mindfulness is staying present on purpose with all our senses without judgment. So when we become more mindful, we can then choose the path that we normally go down, which is the rabbit hole of fight or flight, or we can choose a different path. And so that practice is a practice. It's never perfected. It's a moment-to-moment awareness of which fork in the road are we going to take right now, right? What are we going to say in this next moment? How are we going to react to this person's behavior? How are we going to show up at the end of the day when we're tired? Are we going to hit the refrigerator and binge out? Or are we going to take a shower, take a break, do some breathing, and come back and reassess what you want to really eat? Those are all places where I still continue to grow.
Likewise.
And continue to teach my patients the same thing.
Yeah.
And so when we come from a place of humility, because we are coming from a place of knowing, we become better teachers.
Sure.
So.
Okay, I think it's time to eat.
Oh, okay.
Are you hungry?
I am hungry.
Okay, good. We're going to move over to the table and we'll finish the conversation.
Let's do it.
So, what are we eating? It's delicious, by the way.
I know I just took a bite.
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of made like a Mexican skillet. So, I did grass-fed organic ground turkey, put that in skillet, browned it, added a spice blend, which is basically sea salt, paprika, chili powder, oregano, garlic salt, cumin, coriander, black pepper. Mixed it all together, added it in there, and then I added onion, jalapeno, garlic, fresh tomatoes, sauteed that for a few minutes, added some chicken stock, and then added a little bit of Monterey Jack cheese, and then I took some tortilla and cut them into basically chips and put those in there, and then baked it in the oven at like 375 for about 20 minutes, and then put a little more cheese on the top, and then at 400 for about 10 minutes just to get the tortillas like nice and crispy. And then we're serving it with a fresh guacamole. So that's just fresh avocado. I put some cherry tomatoes in there, green onion, cilantro. I did the same spice blend that I used for the skillet in there, and then a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and that's it.
Just to keep it from oxidizing?
Exactly.
Very nice.
And just to give it a little bit of like that citrus.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll put lime juice, but then sometimes I'll do a little vinegar.
This is very filling, by the way.
It is.
Yeah.
It's very, So you can make, what's nice about a lot of the meals that we try and do at home is we try and do things that are easy, maybe a little bit more on the one pot side that you can have, throughout the week. I mean, you can have this for breakfast. If you're not a breakfast eater, you can have it for lunch. It's just it's nice and convenient, and it's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of health, what we've talked about the gut health, what are some tips that you could offer patients and anybody who's watching this segment about gut health? What can they do at home to kind of start the first step of getting, better gut health?
Yeah. So the first step is always going to be your food, right? So it's always going to be reassessing your kitchen and your meal plan. So it's hard to change. Change is difficult. Staying the same is easy. So the first step is making tiny shifts in the quality of food that you're buying. It doesn't mean that you change how you eat, because just like you've made a Mexican skillet, there's a lot of people out there that might have burgers and pizza and tacos in their meal plan. But just changing the ingredients.
Exactly.
Right? Shifting to less preservatives, less chemicals, less high fructose corn syrup, less sugar added, and just finding quality in their food. That's it. Not making a big change, just buying better quality food. And so once they start doing that, the second thing is also making time for food.
Right.
Because sometimes people want to fix their gut health, but they want a pill, they want a supplement,
Exactly.
they want a protocol, they want something to get rid of something, but they don't want to actually put anything healthy in, right? So just getting them in the mindset of saying, okay, how are you going to prepare your meals? And like you said, a lot of my patients just don't have the time or the bandwidth, so it's not realistic to tell them to cook a meal from scratch that's going to take them an hour. Finding ways to multi-meal. So whether it's meal kits that they get, and they save one for the next day, like like a portion of something for the next day, you put some brainstorming. How do I make my meals last? How do I make leftovers? So for me, you and I shared this earlier, but I'm not a chef. I don't have a lot of time or interest to do a lot of heavy cooking. So what I do is I have breakfast in the morning that I spend 5 minutes doing, whether it's eggs and greens and sauerkraut and berries. That's my usual go-to. And then my lunch is always my dinner leftover. So I pack, a case of food left over from the night before for me to take to work the next day. I don't keep anything at the office that's tempting, because chances are that if I had something in the kitchen, and you know what doctor's offices can be like, if there's anything in there from Christmas holiday leftover stuff, I'm going to find my way back to it. So I need to make sure that I don't have tempting food around me. So that's the other thing I tell my patients is, if you don't want to have that cookie, if you don't want to have that Haagen-Dazs, don't buy it. Make it invisible. Make it the path of most resistance.
Exactly.
Make it hard to attain. It doesn't mean you can't have it. It just means that you have to really make it not a habit. Right? Exactly. So make it simple. Make it like something you like, and make it something you don't hate too much.
Exactly.
Because
Great advice.
humans are programmed to find the path of least resistance and only eat things that they enjoy.
Right.
So if I tell them to make something that's healthy, like a bean salad, but they hate beans,
Yeah.
they're not going to do it very well. So it has to be their idea. So first, clean up your ingredients. 2 is really getting the mindset of prepping your meal.
Yeah.
And then it's a trajectory from there, right? So then you want to add in color, like we talked about. You want to add in variety. You want to add in fiber.
Yeah.
Sometimes with people that have chronic gut issues, the biggest problem is they don't get enough fiber in their diet. The American diet has 15 to 20 grams of fiber a day, but we need 30 to 40. Most people aren't even aware of how much fiber they're getting.
Yeah.
So I might say, you know what, as an experiment, pull out MyFitnessPal, which is a free tracking app, and just for a week, I want you to put down what you eat and see how much fiber you're actually getting per day. And then I want you to slowly, incrementally increase it to 30 minimum. And so I give them one task at a time. So these are some simple tips. Work on the quality of food, work on food prep, and then work on one thing that you're working on per week. Well, let's say it's how much water you drink, or how much fiber you're eating, or how much diversity of color you're putting into your diet. Just one thing. Because I think if you give people too many things to change, chances are they might gung-ho it for a week. And then it gets too difficult, and then they don't do any of it.
Right.
And for anybody who isn't familiar on all the different types of fiber, what are some of the, what do you mean by fiber? Like, what are some foods that they can start incorporating into their meals?
Well, there's soluble fiber, there's insoluble fiber, and there's also prebiotic fibers. So we talked a little bit about the gut microbiome, right? These are trillions of bacteria that live in your colon. The one thing that your good bacteria love to eat is fiber. So the more fiber in your diet, the healthier and more diverse your gut microbiome. So there are 3 different kinds of fiber. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to be very particular. But prebiotic fibers are special fibers that your body doesn't break down, but the bacteria love to eat. These are things like onions and garlic and artichokes, Jerusalem artichokes, you've heard of that, inulin, chicory root, green bananas, rice and potato starch. These are types of prebiotic fibers that are super healthy for growing healthy bacteria like Akkermansia and Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium and Bacteroides. So if you can increase the amount of prebiotic fibers, whether in supplement form or in food, it can help your bacteria. Second is insoluble fibers. These are fibers that work like a bristle brush, okay? So they basically scrape the inside of your colon. They're cleaning you out on the inside. They're a little rough, like psyllium and, some of the brown rice, things that are just not going to break down in your body, but act like a cleaning brush, one of those bottle brushes. And you can add that in the form of grains if you're not sensitive like I was. So this could be barley and oats and rice and quinoa and beans and legumes and lentils and soy. And these are very good, healthy fibers that can help you clean out your gut. So a lot of people have trouble with constipation. And, these fibers are really good for that. The last type of fiber is soluble fibers. If you've ever taken a soluble fiber and added water to it, what happens? It congeals, right? So soluble fiber actually works like a sponge. It absorbs water and it also then accumulates. It sucks in all the crud, all the toxic waste, all the leftover waste matter. So when you're eating fiber, think of it as a sponge and a bristle brush. And when you consume that fiber, it's taking all the debris, all the fecal matter, all the waste, all the things that you don't want in your body out and pushes it out. So if you're having trouble with your bowels, you're not getting enough fiber, you're not getting enough water. So I usually say those are the 2 big things to work on. So anything that comes from a plant is a fiber. So if you're eating vegetables, fruit with the skin on them, beans, legumes, lentils, seeds, nuts, whole grains, you're going to get a ton of fiber there. But if you're not getting enough fiber in your diet, you track it and you're like, I've eaten as much as I can, I can't get any more fiber, then I'll suggest a supplement. And the most common supplements out there are like psyllium husk. And I always recommend like an organic psyllium husk or guar gum. That's another one, like Russian guar is another type of fiber that people buy. Whenever buying supplements though, always with a grain of salt. It's not a replacement for healthy food. You also want to add in the fact that not all supplements are made the same. You want to get good quality, organic, well-sourced, and you know what you're taking in a supplement.
Now, what about probiotics?
Probiotics. So probiotics are basically the good bacteria that we want in our gut. Okay? So the microbiome is essentially bacteria, and probiotics are pharmaceutical products that have bacteria in them. They may either be in spore form, where they can withstand the acid in your stomach and the terrains of moving through your colon and make it to the bowels intact. So those spore-based probiotics are common. Or they could just be live organisms. And you might find that they are in capsule form, powder form, refrigerated, non-refrigerated. So it's $1 billion industry.
Right.
So you have to be really mindful and careful that there's not every probiotic is going to fit every person. But I find it fascinating that we have now learned more and more about the different species. And there are certain species that are really good for the skin. Some species really good for brain health, for mood health, and weight health, metabolic health. And so sometimes what I do in my practice is I will order a stool analysis. And again, grain of salt. We're still in the learning phases of how to use these tests. But I'll do a stool analysis to see what somebody's gut bacteria looks like. And if they're missing variety and diversity, then I'll try to find a probiotic that will give them the phyla that they need and the volume that they need. But ultimately, my patient will tell me whether that probiotic is the right one for them.
Sure.
Because sometimes even the perfect probiotic may cause damage to the person. It can cause gas and bloating and irregularity in their stools. So there's no one size fits all.
Could that be a normal part of the reset though? Start introducing a probiotic and then developing, sometimes when you introduce a healthy lifestyle, you detoxify and you actually feel worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always say slow and steady with progress, right? So that even goes for fiber.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes if you go gung-ho and buy a bunch of fiber and put it all in there, you might feel...
Disaster pants.
Yeah. I don't know if you know Dr. Terry Walls, but she's a functional doctor, and she talks about poop a lot. And she says, you want to poop until your poop looks like snakes. Okay? And if you get snakes in your pants, you've had too much fiber. So there is that happy medium.
Sure.
Making sure you go slow with fiber, you introduce it slowly so the body gets used to it. And just like a garden, you want to fertilize the ground first, and then you want to add in the probiotics. Okay, so if you don't have a good amount of fiber in your colon, and then you're trying to add in organisms, it's going to be a war down there. Okay, and there's not enough food, so there's scarcity. And when there's pathogens in there, overgrowth of yeast in there, and now you're adding in probiotics without setting the terrain by removing those organisms and replenishing the fiber, your probiotic capsules are not going to do you well. So there's a method to the madness. When people come to see me, the first phase that I put them through is remove. So I remove the poor quality food. That's the low-lying food. Right? I remove any overgrowth, like we were talking about SIBO or small intestinal bowel overgrowth. I'll remove the overgrowth of organisms. I'll look for dysbiosis or overgrowth of certain organisms, parasites or candida or anything else that may be causing this person not to feel good. So the first phase is removing toxins, chemicals, food sensitivities that they may have, inflammatory foods, processed foods, chemicals, and infections. The second phase is replace. So before I re-inoculate, I will replace fiber. And if they're not vagally towing, then I work on their vagus nerve to help them replace acid production, enzyme production, saliva, bile secretions. And if they aren't doing well with that, I will give them supplementation for that. So I'll give them digestive enzymes or bile or acid to help them with digestion. So resetting by replacing. And then when they feel good and they've removed the substances getting in the way and they've replaced with things that are nourishing their body and supporting the body's healing processes, then I will re-inoculate. So just like with your SIBO treatment, oftentimes we don't re-inoculate in the first stage. We have to take a time to remove what is getting in the way of healing, replace the nutrients you need, then re-inoculate. And that goes for probiotics as well as in fermented foods sometimes. And then when I find the right probiotic to help them with their balance, meaning diversity in their probiotic, enough sufficient volume, and the right blend, then I'll do what's called the repair phase, which is I'll give them things that help soothe the gut lining. This could be increasing leafy greens and zinc and tannins that come in tea and pigmented fruit like pomegranate, things that can help reset the lining of the gut. One of the things that we know causes autoimmune diseases is leaky gut. And maybe a decade ago, physicians didn't really recognize leaky gut, but now we know that gut permeability is a real thing. And increased gut permeability increases immune activation. So fixing the gut lining by increasing that biofilm, by supporting the gut microbiome, by increasing the short-chain fatty acids like propionate and butyrate and acetate to help seal and speckle and heal the leaky gut.
And what foods contain those?
Good question. So short-chain fatty acids and postbiotics. So we talked about prebiotics, that's the fiber. We talked about probiotics, which is the bacteria. And then there's the postbiotics or symbiotics. And those are the byproducts of what bacteria make once they consume the fiber. So think of it as their waste becomes our food. Okay. So the bacteria will consume fiber and produce butyrate, will produce propionate, will produce acetate. Those then feed the enterocytes. The enterocytes are the cells lining your GI tract. Did you know that your GI tract is only 7 days old?
Oh, wow.
The lining of your GI tract is only one cell layer thick.
Oh, wow.
And it replaces itself every 7 days.
Wow.
And its health is determined by its food source, which is the short-chain fatty acids. Now, you can get butyrate with certain fats like butter or ghee. So clarified butter is something that has been used in our culture for a really long time And clarified butter is very rich in butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid. Coconut is an MCT oil, also very good to heal and to nourish the gut lining.
Okay.
So nourishing the gut lining, removing the pathogens, replacing the nutrients, allowing for proper digestion, reinoculation, and then the most important step is restoring the mind-body connection. So you can do all the other pieces, but never really work on your anxiety, on your insomnia, on your stress, on your work schedule, on your relationship stress, and you'll find that you're back to square one. Okay? I get a lot of patients with SIBO. They go through the protocol, they take the Zipraximine, they take the neomycin, they do the low FODMAP diet, they do all the things, but they didn't really work on vagus nerve and vagal toning, and SIBO comes back. Right? Refractory SIBO, recurrent SIBO, it's all because we didn't really work on the underlying nervous regulation of the valve. Because those valves that close off the small intestine from the large intestine are toned by the vagus nerve.
Okay.
And so when our vagus nerve is not functioning well, it's hypofunctioning, those valves, the ileocecal valve is wide open. So you treat the SIBO and then you don't treat the vagus nerve. That valve being wide open is an open door for bacteria to come right back in.
So does that mean, so let's just say you have SIBO, you clear it out, and then you practice all the stress reduction techniques and for your vagus nerve. But, as humans, you're going to have stressful times. So does that mean eventually does the SIBO come back in?
That's when you fortify your gut microbiome.
Okay.
So you're always working on, and I always tell people, stress is inevitable.
Yeah.
You're never going to be able to live in a bubble.
Right.
Right? That's just not even practical. It's being mindful and recognizing when you surge, because the sympathetic tone is just as important as the parasympathetic tone. They're like having your left hand and your right hand and saying, only my right hand is important. Right? They're both equally important.
Yeah.
So when you see that surge of sympathetic tone, you, the awareness that lives in this mind-body unit, is responsible for noticing it. And then if it charges you to become more productive, great. But as soon as that task is done, now it's your job to activate the parasympathetic. So then you choose. Is it a walk in nature? Is it 5 deep breaths? Is it listening to music? Is it writing something down? Reading something spiritual? How do you reset? So there's this constant ebb and flow through your day of surging and relaxing and surging and relaxing and surging. And as you wave through your day, as you go through this conscious state, which is a sympathetic tone, and then go into sleep, which is a parasympathetic tone, you're constantly in this circular cycle of life that we talk about, right? Everything cycles through life, including your consciousness and unconsciousness, or your sympathetic and your parasympathetic tone. So how do you keep from getting sick again? You don't sit in fear and worry, but when you start to feel that surge of gas and bloating and constipation and things have gotten out of balance, you start back up. You replace the things that might have been getting in the way. You remove those things. You replace the nutrients that your body needs to support your good, healthy bugs. Reinoculate with, with sauerkraut and kimchi and sourdough and kefir and yogurt. And you replace and replenish your body with nutrients that help heal the gut lining. And then you go back to that meditation practice that you let go of because you were stressed. Right? And you bring mindful practices like mindful walking or your 5 senses or a body scan. Any of the tools in your tool belt that help you get realigned. Your body is built for homeostasis. It wants to come back to baseline. And in medicine, we know homeostasis because we do lab tests. And what are we looking at when we look at the normal values? Homeostasis, right? We say, well, your sodium is between 135 and 145, so you're normal. How does the body do that? Because it's constantly fine-tuning homeostasis. Your body temperature is 98.5. You're great. How does the body do that? It's finding homeostasis. It's finding that sweet spot that it wants to be in when it's in the flow. And so when you, the awareness that's living in this mind-body unit, recognizes that we're no longer in homeostasis, then you're responsible for choosing your choices in your environment that brings you back to homeostasis. That's all you have to do. One day, one moment at a time. what else about the gut? Is there anything else that makes you curious?
Well, so on the topic of probiotics that
Yeah.
Ash brought up, so I don't take a probiotic supplement. I try to do a lot of my probiotics through food.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you, as far as supplement versus food, I mean, I know that the supplements that are out there, a lot of the acid in your gut can eat them before they even give your gut any benefit. But so for me, that's why I stick more towards food, which I do what you talked about, the sourdough, I do kefir, I do sauerkraut, all of that is what do you think what's better, the supplement or the food?
Always food first.
Okay.
Or food first. And it's all ancient wisdom culture.
Mm-hmm.
We know from wisdom traditions, every community on this planet has included some type of fermented food into their diet, whether it's, looking at natto or miso or kimchi, or looking at yogurt, or looking at kefir, or looking at sauerkraut, or looking at beer, looking at sourdough bread. We just kind of have evolved knowing that there's a wisdom to fermented food. And the nice thing about mixing the bacteria with food is it has a vehicle to bypass all the, the toxic environment, the journey that it has to take from your mouth to your colon. So food is definitely by far the best way. The other way, and you and I have talked about this too, is to garden.
Yeah.
Because if you're outside, and that's the one thing that has shifted and changed in our environment, we've gone to the clean hypothesis, right? That our environments have become super clean with hand sanitizers and wiping everything down and dishwashers and living indoors instead of outdoors. That too has shifted our gut microbiome.
Okay.
And so when we look at indigenous cultures, they have a plethora of diversity and volume that we don't have in the Western world. And that's because they live closer to the earth. And their hands are in the earth, and they're sharing bugs with the earth. Their food is straight from the earth. So that lightly soiled carrot, just gently washing it and eating it right from your garden is the way you replenish your gut microbes.
Oh, okay.
And that's really healthy for your gut microbiome. So a lot of times if you have pets in the home, you have two lovely pets. If they're indoor, outdoor animals, they're outside digging in the dirt. They come inside, they lick you. They're sharing their gut microbiome with you. And studies show that children that grow up with animals have a healthier immune system, less allergies, and less asthma than kids who don't.
Wow.
Isn't that funny? And so the excessive cleanliness, the excessive hand washing, the excessive protectiveness, we are removing ourselves from the exchange of the microbiome with our environment, with the earth. So reconnecting to the earth, growing our own food, spending time in the sun, spending time in the soil, really also is also part of health and wellness.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't right now. No, this has been fascinating though. What an amazing conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for this lovely meal.
You're welcome.
Such a delicious thing. I'm going to have to get the recipe and make sure it shows up in my home too.
So when people want to come and find you,
tell
us where they can find you.
So I practice in Scottsdale, Arizona. So folks that are in Arizona can come see me. And I am located, my clinic name is AZ Integrative Medicine and Spa. I'm located on Shea and 116. And people can see me virtually and in person.
You're also on social media.
I am. They can find me on social media. I have Instagram, TikTok. TikTok's probably my biggest platform right now.
Oh, really?
Okay.
And it's Jyoti Patel MD, and on Instagram it's Dr. Jyoti Patel MD.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here and giving us sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you guys. Yeah.